All right, team. So here's another one we're just going to jump into. This is the 2024 VCE exam, the mainstream exam, not the NHT exam. This is question 7. We've got 10 marks and we'll try and knock it over in less than 10 minutes. So our scenario here is that measles is a highly contagious viral infection. Might come in handy later to know the type of pathogen that it is. And how it is spread is when one person who's infected coughs or sneezes. So this is also our mode of transmission, bit of information there. This might come in handy later on if we need to talk about how to reduce the spread, factors that contribute to the spread, anything like that. In Australia, health authorities report cases of measles to a national body. That's great. That is the NNDSS, I think the National Notifiable Disease Surveillance System. You can look up there all the diseases that are going around at the moment and see what you're going to get lucky with. The number of reported cases of measles from 1991 to 2002 is shown in the graph below. Here's our graph just here. It says a bit of an interesting trend, right? So somewhere around 1500, and then in the early 90s it skyrocketed up here. It then decreased down and it went up here in 1997. And if you're aware, you may be aware, this was when a guy by the name of Andrew Wakefield published a report that he was paid to publish about vaccines causing autism. So there was a bit of a spike there, and he's sort of the guy who started that whole notion about vaccines having really detrimental effect to people's development. If we go down here, the first question is identify one action taken within the Australian population. It's nice they've bolded one, right? And it's identify that may have led to the change in number of cases from 1994 onwards. Explain how this action could cause this change. So we've got 1994 way up here. We've got, almost 4,700 maybe. And onwards, this trend overall is going down. Yes, there's some small spikes there, but overall we're on a big decline with the measles in Australia. So one action, really it could be anything here potentially. We could be talking about vaccination, which is probably the main one, and the one that I would stick with is 3 marks. So we're probably going to mark here for identifying the one, and then the explain. Right, so this is our 1 mark. And then we've got 2 marks coming here for our explain, and all we're going to be doing here is explaining herd immunity. Right, so we might be mentioning something about less available hosts, something along those lines. Slows the spread, reduced number of cases. Could potentially roll out a definition here. It's probably not 100% necessary. I would just be saying that herd immunity less available hosts for measles leading to a reduced spread. That's our explanation. It's important that when we're explaining that we're saying something occurs which leads to something else, or there's some sort of relationship going on. So for example, here we've got herd immunity, which equals there's less available hosts for measles leading to a reduced spread. And if we want to, could cause this change in our question up here, it says how does it cause this change? Well, let's bring it back to that idea and let's say, therefore, less cases or reduced cases. Right, really important here for explains. We're using that terminology like leads to show a relationship, but it's also really important that if we're getting something like cause this change, we're actually going to identify the change in our response. Let's hustle down here to the next one. Measles is no longer endemic. Okay, so we don't expect it to exist at a baseline level in Australia anymore. Bit of information here. There's 3 new cases. The health alert listed the public locations that infected individuals had visited. Identify a potential source of the measles infections for these 3 individuals. And state 2 benefits, okay, of listing the public locations. So a source could be a traveller, okay. It could also be a mutation in the measles, in measles antigens, so we no longer recognise it. That's probably a bit unlikely unless it's a big shift event, especially in measles. Alternatively, you could say that an unvax people contracted it. But this last point here is probably not great for a potential source. They've obviously contracted it from somewhere. It's unlikely they just caught it from nowhere. Sorry. So a traveller coming from overseas is good. Mutation in measles is also good, especially related to antigens. Now, 2 benefits of listing it. Right, it means people can isolate. Okay, it means people can really do anything that we may have experienced during COVID-19. So people can avoid certain areas. They can get tested, right? It's only 2, and again, it's been bolded here. VCAR tend to start bolding things in these exams, especially for questions where they're asking for a certain quantity of responses. Isolate, get tested, avoid hotspots, right? Is that terminology that was sort of being thrown around during COVID, if we remember that. So avoid those hotspots. Great. 3 marks there. 1 mark for how it came about, and 2 marks for benefits of listing those. Measles is known as a pathogen that's re-emerging. So it's existed and now it's existing again. And this is a brand new one. There's also pathogens that are brand new, like COVID, for example. Describe 2 factors that contribute to the emergence of new pathogens in human populations. So it's important that we link it to human populations and emergence, not re-emergence. Okay, they've asked us for emergence here. So there's a few. A nice one, you could always talk about shift, antigenic shift. Okay, and you could say that there's new mutations, which equals no memory. Right, you could also be talking about proximity to wildlife, right, which goes hand in hand a lot of the time with shift, but it's possible that we can contract diseases that weren't present in the human population, right? So we're more likely to contract pathogens from animals if we're closer to them. So it's probably important here that I do say increased proximity. Right, these are 2 options here. There's definitely some others you could say. You might even mention like the melting of ice caps leading to the release of pathogenic bacteria, which is something that we're seeing that's sort of interesting. As the ice caps are melting, there's bacteria frozen in there that are being released and creating new diseases in humans. Potentially could be something to look out for in the next, 10, 20, 30, 40 years. Really important here that we do describe in this question. It's asked us to describe 2 factors, but for whatever reason, they haven't bolded this, whereas they have in the one above. Interestingly, maybe an oversight on their behalf. That was 10 marks in just under 10 minutes. Thanks for sticking around. All the best with the studying.